Let's start on page 75, third paragraph. Let's go over the doing of the fifth step again, talk a little bit about that. Okay. The second paragraph there on page 75 says, we pocket our pride and go to it. Did everybody do that? The fifth step? Eliminating every twisted character and every dark cranny of the past on the fifth step. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, are you sure now that your house cleaning is complete? See, we are delighted. So these are some benchmarks and some things which should be beginning to happen in everybody's life if we have followed the directions and been thorough. We can look the world in the eye. What does that mean? Blame and shame and guilt and all that sort of stuff should begin to dissipate. There ought to be some noticeable results about that. We can be alone in perfect peace and ease without all that gotta get busy stuff that most of us have. That ought to start to dissipate. Our fears fall from us. Have you noticed any lessening of fear since you've done your fourth and fifth steps? What we need to do, see, all of us, is to be looking at stuff in the book, checking our own experience. See, we don't want to be operating on wishes and dreams here. You want to have evidence that this is really the truth and beginning to arrive in your life. Okay, we begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. Anybody feel closer to God as a result of these steps? We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. Everybody begins to get a sense of the difference between believing something and knowing it. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. Anybody get that? That's real important. See, if you're going to be free, see, that's what it means. You need to be free, so that you're not dependent on meetings and people and therapy and self-confidence and this and that, see, in order to keep yourself sober. See, the problem either is disappeared or it's not. And so begin to look at that. We feel we're on the broad highway walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. Hey, this stuff works. I'm starting to get some results. It's noticeable. Okay, return. This is the end of the fifth step now. It says, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we have done. Everybody do that? Take at least an hour, go through the first 5 steps. Ask yourself honestly about all that. Thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything, for we're building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. See, building an arch is it's a lot of work, but an arch is a pretty solid thing. Have you begun to notice that maybe you feel a little more solid in what you're doing? Not so shaky, not so much why daddy, what the hell's going on here, I'm not sure, that kind of stuff. You begin to feel like you got something that's going to work, is the truth. Okay, is our work solid so far? Did you ask yourself these questions? Are the stones properly in place? Step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Everybody remember what that was? The willingness to go through with it all? We tried to make mortar without sand. Okay, we're leaving out any of the essential ingredients, such as honesty and humility and belief in the power of God, and that kind of stuff. Okay, and these are all things that we needed to examine at the end of our fifth step, so that over on page 76, as we get into step 6, that first sentence makes some sense. It says if we can answer to our satisfaction. Okay, see, and right here is where, see, responsibility really goes blam on a recovered alcoholic. Okay, because all of us have some experience that we can deceive ourselves. We all have some experience that we can deceive others. And we all have some experience that others can't deceive us. Okay, so the only thing that's going to work at this point is answering these questions to our satisfaction honestly. So you can tell somebody else you're satisfied, but what if you're not really? And that's what we all need to look at here. Say, have I answered all of this to my own satisfaction? Am I complete and thorough in steps 1 through 5? And the reason I'm kind of hitting on this hard is because this is the foundation now of what we're going to continue to do, which is all action. What steps 6 through 12 are all about. if, and that's a pretty big if, isn't it? If we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. We've emphasized willingness as being what? Indispensable. What does indispensable mean?
Critical.
Yeah, critical, you can't do without it, necessary, vital, all that. Okay. Are we now, what's now mean? Here in the present moment. Ready, everybody remember what ready means? You got to get ready to go to work, you got to get ready to do a lot of things. Yeah. So how are we getting ready here? By doing the first 5 steps, taking an honest look. To let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable. So we're going to take a little bit of a look at the things we have admitted are objectionable. And we're going to do that by going through step 6 and 12 and 12. And can he now take them all, every one? It's kind of a blunt question, and it would require a lot of what? Honesty. Willingness on our part. So if we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. So what I want you to notice is the chapter title over on the top of page 77. It says what? Into action. And notice that in step 6 here, in this one paragraph, they have 2 actions. The one is, that we are willing to let God remove something objectionable from us. And they're going to give us an action to take at that point. And the other action is we're not willing. Okay? And if we're not willing, then they give us an action to take on something called not willing. See, and what's the action we take on not willing? See, we start asking God for willingness, not for removal. All right? See, so now you got 2 actions which cover all objectionable things in your life. See, and in both cases, what we need to do is to be into action. Unwillingness at this point, really isn't that big a problem. Where our big problem comes in is inaction. Or being dishonest with ourselves about something in terms of willingness. Yes, I'm willing for God to remove this. Blam. See, but deep down I'm really not. See, so now, I say a prayer, but I'm unwilling, so nothing happens. See, and now I get stuck. Okay? The other problem is, if I think I'm willing and I'm not really willing, then I can't be praying for willingness, can I? Okay. So either one of those 2 things is going to put me in a position of inaction. Okay. So can you see that? See, that unwillingness isn't really the problem. It's perfectly okay to be unwilling as long as we're honest about it. See, where we're unwilling, we just ask for willingness, and at that point we're in action. See, and that means spiritual growth can continue. It's where we kid ourselves about willingness, and say that we are when we aren't. See, that no action happens. See, when no action happens, then this thing called I'm stuck starts to occur. See, and then crap starts happening in your life. See, and then you get a wet burlap bag and start beating out the forest fire. See, and you can never see what set the whole thing in motion, see, which was a basic, dishonest kind of thing that you're not even aware of. See, called inaction along the spiritual line. Can you begin to see that? Everybody? Okay.
So it's honesty about our willingness.
Yeah.
Whether we are willing or not willing.
Yes, that's the key thing.
And if we're not willing, we pray for willingness.
Right. So as long as you're being honest with yourself, there is absolutely no need to beat yourself up about any unwillingness that you find. See, I had some stuff, especially sexual stuff, that came up in step 6. Major league unwilling. Okay? See, and what I learned was that the unwilling is not my problem. See, it's if I try to force myself to be willing when I'm not, or kid myself about being willing when I'm not, see, all I need to do is to be humble enough to admit to God, as I understand Him, that I'm not willing. Here I am, I'm a human being who's not willing, and I need some willingness. See? And then I just start praying for willingness. That could take years. Who knows? Okay. Everybody getting that? It's kind of a paradoxical thing, a flip-flop. It makes you begin to realize that step 6 and step 7 are not about being perfect. They are about being human. Okay? Just accepting your humanness right where you are, being okay with that. Okay? And not beating yourself up. Okay? Not being full of self-pity and guilt and remorse and all that. See, because that stuff doesn't work. Those are just shortcomings. We need to accept ourselves exactly as we are. Everybody in here did a 5th step, right? you're not a saint? Is everybody real clear that you're not a saint? Cool. See, no problem. See, don't beat yourself up about being not a saint. See, the point here, if you remember in the first paragraph of how it works, it was honesty, honesty, honesty. If willingness is indispensable, then we need to be honest about the whole issue of willingness as we get into more vigorous action. So, everybody see that? Okay, so now we're going to go over to step 6 in the 12 and 12. And we're going to read this whole thing. And I don't generally do a lot of 12 and 12 stuff in book studies, but step 6 is sometimes kind of hard for people to grab hold of. So we're going to go over what Bill says here. So the exact words of the step are, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. What's the difference between being ready to have God remove them and being ready to do it ourselves?
God might have a chance.
Yeah, that's true. Have you ever noticed in whatever efforts you have put into changing your own life that you always have an agenda? See, I'm going to work on this, and then I'm going to work on that. And then I'm going to work, and it's kind of like this thing that we set up automatically, I'm going to work on my procrastination, and then my anger, and then I'm going to do something about my fear, and on and on. See, and that's a totally self-determined thing. See, that's not by any means God's plan for the removal of anything at all. See, we don't know that. See, we just assume, that we know the best way to remove things and the best order in which they should be worked on and all that. Can you see that in your own experience? See, almost all of us have been through that kind of stuff. See, did it work?
Getting back into self-will again.
Right. Yeah, totally self-willed kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's all based on an assumption of power. See, and we ought to be getting pretty clear by this point that we don't have power over our character defects and our shortcomings. See, and that we need to be entirely ready to have God remove them, but that means we don't get the blueprints, doesn't it? Who's in control of this change process, this removal process, us or God? Yeah, who'd you turn your will and your life over to? If you read the words of step 6 very carefully, they're an awful lot like step 1, aren't they? It's pretty much just another admission of powerlessness, see, and unmanageability in terms of how our lives are going and how our character is and how it's going to be changed and all that sort of stuff. And if you look at step 7, it's an awful lot like step 2. It's another one that you came to believe kind of steps. A solution to a powerless condition. Okay, but let's look at step 6 in the 12 problem. Okay, it says, first line says, this is the step that separates the men from the boys, and the girls from the women. Okay, see, what is it actually that separates men from boys? So if I ask Daniel to come in here and stand next to Joe, see, what actually separates these two humans? Age is one thing. Maturity, sure. Growth. That kind of stuff. See, so what's step 6 about? See, maturity, growth, change. What is the last thing any of us really is into doing? Change. Anybody have fear of change on your 5th step? See, it has a major fear. The unknown, what God wants for you and all that. See, people who don't change, see, never grow up. See, it just doesn't happen. See, so we all have to face the fact that change has to occur. And that's why he says this is the step that separates the men from the boys. That's why you see so many people in AA are still, acting like children in many cases. Fighting and arguing and running riot, see, out of control. See, because they've never been willing to change. They've never been humble enough to change. Okay, so step 6 sounds like a pretty heavy-duty deal, doesn't it? See, when you start to think about it, if the word amend down 3 steps from where we are means change, see, can someone who hasn't changed run out and change or fix the relationships in their life? An unchanged person can't make any amends. They can go out and slap a few apologies and some band-aids on the problems in their life. But that's about it. No change. And most of the time what happens, see, when we do that is people go, yeah, right. I've heard this before. Because they don't see any change. It's not real. It ain't genuine. See, they can't tell. They just hear it in the words again. So this is the step that separates the men from the boys. See, we're either going to change or we're not going to change. Okay, so we can't change ourselves, so who we got to be ready to have changes? See, God, as you understand it. See, in the preceding 5 steps, see, if you're getting some results, you got to be beginning to be aware that God definitely has power to do this. Everybody seeing that? The definite results can happen. God definitely has power to do it. And the only thing that prevents it from being done is our own either dishonesty or unwillingness, and that's it. Change can and will occur, see, for anyone who literally is seeking it and asking God to do that. But that means the agenda is not ours. See, the methods are not ours. And see, that takes some humility, right? Okay, so this is a step that separates the men from the boys. So declares a well-loved clergyman who happens to be one of AA's greatest friends. I think that well-loved clergyman was Sam Shoemaker. Anybody know who that is? One of Bill Wilson's good friends and one of the founders of the Oxford group in New York. Okay, he goes on to explain that any person, see, would that include the women? Any person capable of enough willingness and what? What have we just been talking about? 15 minutes. Willingness and honesty. See, capable of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly. See? So what you want to do is be chronic on step 6, see, over and over. See, to try repeatedly, step 6, on all his faults, see, without any reservations whatever. Okay, has indeed come a long way spiritually, and is therefore entitled to be called a man or a woman. See, and see, the way Bill writes this, see, you can kind of like, sort of like a Medal of Honor. See, he's not kidding. See, he's entitled to be called a man, a grown-up, an adult, whatever you want to call it. See, who is sincerely trying to grow in the image and likeness of his own Creator, God, how we understand it. To me, that's always been a very, very heavy-duty sentence. Yeah.
It says own Creator in there. That indicates that there's maybe more than one.
Well, it could say that. The way I read that is just God as you understand it. Okay. Of course, the often disputed question of whether God can and will, under certain conditions, remove defects of character will be answered with a prompt affirmative by almost any AA member. But remember, this was written in 1952. I doubt that sentence would apply too much to a lot of the groups we have today. To him, this proposition will be no theory at all. So anybody who's worked the steps, nothing theoretical about that. It will be just about the largest fact of his life, that God can and will bring about the major changes in our life. He will usually offer his proof in a statement like this. Sure, I was beaten, absolutely licked. My own willpower just wouldn't work on alcohol. Change of scene, the best efforts of family, friends, doctors, and clergymen got no place with my alcoholism. I simply couldn't stop drinking, and no human being could seem to do the job for me. But when I became willing to clean house, and then asked a higher power, God as I understood it, to give me release, my obsession to drink vanished. It was lifted right out of me. In AA meetings all over the world, statements just like this are heard daily. Remember, that's 1952. I don't hear much of this stuff anymore at all. It is plain for everybody to see that each sober AA member has been granted a release from this very obstinate and potentially fatal obsession. So in a very complete and literal way, all AAs have become entirely ready to have God remove the mania for alcohol from their lives. And God has proceeded to do exactly that. Having been granted a perfect release from alcoholism, why then shouldn't we be able to achieve by the same means a perfect release from every other difficulty or defect? One of the things we've seen in the book up to this point, see, about discovering a solution to all of life's problems. It's been mentioned 2 or 3 times. See, this is a riddle of our existence, the full answer to which may be only in the mind of God. Nevertheless, at least part of the answer to it is apparent to us. When men and women pour so much alcohol into themselves that they destroy their lives, they commit a most unnatural act. Defying their instinctive desire for self-preservation, they seem bent upon what? Self-destruction. Okay, so as we go through this, I'm going to write some of these things up on the board, and just so you can get a sense of how to take the stuff that you find apart. Defiance, he just mentioned. Self-destruction. Anybody see any of these on your list? Might those be defects of character? See those in any area of your life? Defying their instinctive desire for self-preservation, they seem bent on self-destruction. They work against their own deepest instinct. As they are humbled by the terrific beating administered by alcohol, the grace of God can enter them and expel their obsession. Here, their powerful instinct to live can cooperate fully with their Creator's desire to give them what? New life. Ask you, is that what you're seeking? New life becomes a spiritual thing. For nature and God alike abhor suicide. But most of our other difficulties don't fall under such a category at all. Every normal person wants, for example, to eat, to reproduce, to be somebody in the society of his fellows. And he wishes to be reasonably safe and secure as he tries to attain these things. Indeed, God made him that way. He did not design man to destroy himself by alcohol, but he did give man instincts to help him stay alive. It is nowhere evident, at least in this life, that our Creator expects us fully to eliminate our instinctual drives. What would you call that? Fully eliminate. Well, dead would be one thing. Eunuch would be another. Okay, so it's interesting kind of terms that are coming up. I'm thinking of something totally different. I'm thinking of a word called perfect. You gotta ask yourself, have you ever gotten a mailgram from God that said, "It is my express wish that you be perfect"? No. So far as we know, it is nowhere on the record that God has completely removed from any human being all his natural drives. Since most of us are born with an abundance of natural desires, it isn't strange that we often let these cards seat their intended purpose. Find any of that kind of stuff on your fifth step, especially in column 4 and the sex inventory. When they drive us blindly, or we willfully demand, find any demands on your inventory. We willfully demand that they supply us with more satisfactions and pleasures than are possible or due us. That is the point at which we depart from the degree of perfection. It isn't a departure from perfection. It's a departure from what? A degree of perfection. See, that God wishes for us here on earth. And that is the measure of our character defects, or if you wish, our sins. I'm not into the word sins, but if you are, you can look at character defects that way if it makes more sense to you. If we ask, God will certainly forgive our derelictions, but in no case does he render us white as snow and keep us that way without what? Our cooperation. Okay, is everybody starting to get over the idea that God is Santa Claus somehow, or is spiritual bail bondsman? There's definitely work that we need to do, see, that keeps the power coming and the things happening, all that kind of stuff. As long as we're willing to do it, it keeps happening. When we don't do it, stuff starts going on. Okay, let's see. That is something we are supposed to be willing to work toward ourselves. Remember page 60 in the big book? The point is that we are willing to grow along the spiritual line. Are you? Is everybody getting pretty clear about there's a task ahead? He asks only that we try as best we know how to make progress in the building of character. See, now, see, are we trying as best we know how if we don't pay any attention to any of the instructions that we find in the book? Just kind of like make up our own program. See, that's, we can say I'm doing things to the best of my ability, but that's a pretty ignorant position, see, for someone in AA to be taking. So trying the best we know how means, hey, why don't we find the method by which this works and then do that? So you put some effort into that. Okay, so step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, is AA's way of stating the best possible what? Attitude. The best possible attitude one can take in order to make a beginning on this what? Lifetime job. Has everybody, grasped that one? Say that we're not looking for instant perfection. It isn't necessary to go in and fill up the bathtub and stand on the water. See, that's not what we're talking about here. Okay. This does not mean that we expect all our character defects to be lifted out of us as the drive to drink was. A few of them may be, but with most of them we shall have to be content with patient improvement. Okay. That means there's what? Some work ahead. The key words, entirely ready. Okay, what does entire mean? Complete, whole. Okay, ready, it means prepared. Okay, underline the fact that we want to aim at the very best we know or can learn. Okay, are you doing that? Are you getting a sense of that? See, to start to aim at the best, see, that's possible. See, that's a totally different attitude for most of us. He's going to bring this up in a page or two. How many of us have this degree of readiness? See, if we're honest with ourselves, see, probably none of us. So, see, what does getting entirely ready mean? That means doing something, see, to attain this. See, in an absolute sense, practically nobody has it. See, the best we can do with all the honesty that we can suffer, or summon, is to try to have it. Okay? See, and for most of us, this is entirely new stuff, so you can expect to do what? Stumble some, make some mistakes, get stuck, all that, have a few collisions, be mistaken, misunderstand, see, all that human kind of stuff, is that likely to go on? See?
A lot of unknowns.
Yeah, lots of unknowns as well. Even then, the best of us will discover to our dismay that there is always a sticking point, a point at which we shall say, no, I can't give this up yet. See? No kidding. See, one of the things I'm pretty clear about when somebody walks up and tells me, oh yeah, I'm totally willing to have all my defects of character removed, see, probably not haven't looked into this far enough. Yeah, thorough enough. Okay, so no, I can't give this up yet. And we shall often tread on even more dangerous ground, and this is very dangerous ground when we cry, this I will never give up. Okay, because why? See, once we say that, what have we done? We've closed our mind. All right, action will stop. See, growth will stop, collisions will start, see, and splat is in the future. That's it. Okay, so such is the power of our instincts to overreach themselves. See, so as you get further and further into this, you become more and more aware of what the words cunning, baffling, and powerful mean. See, has anybody begun to, have you seen any examples in yourself of things like self-deception and all that kind of stuff, and it's like you're not even aware of it? See, those kind of things start to happen? Yeah, see, this cunning, baffling, and powerful is no joke. Absolutely no joke. So, no matter how far we have progressed, desires will always be found which oppose the grace of God. All right? Now, underline those words, will always be found. And ask yourself, who's going to find them? See? And how can you find them if you aren't looking? It's true that even a blind hog gets an acorn once in a while, but the assumption here, see, is that we are taking our inventory, see, and that we have begun to be aware. See, and see, desires that oppose the grace of God have a term. What do we call those? Self-will. Okay. What does self-will produce? Collisions. See, so one of the easiest ways to begin to take our own inventory, it's really 10th step stuff, which we haven't gotten into yet, is just notice if you're having a collision. Okay? Anytime you're having a collision, you can pretty much conclude you're running on self-will. See? And then you say you back up from there. Okay, now what's going on? See? This can't be God's will. See, God's will is not about colliding with people. Okay, some who feel they have done well. Anybody feel that way? People who feel they've done well probably haven't learned too much about humility, right? But on the other hand, see, we're going to be talking a lot about taking your inventory, and we're going to be talking a lot about negative stuff, see, because that's the nature of all this. See, we don't get very far and learn all that much from our successes. See, but that doesn't mean to take a wet burlap bag and say, oh no, nothing good has happened. Okay? See, you need to be just as honest with the good results that come your way, which will, see, as well as with the stuff you need to take your inventory on, see, and learn from. Okay? See, it isn't any more honest to walk into an AA meeting and say, oh, nothing's happened, just that. See, when God literally is working in your life, see, and it's, if your obsession to drink, see, has been removed, and you really know that you're set free and that this stuff works, see, it's not all that honest to go into a meeting and say, I don't know nothing about the program. Just here, that's it. So when good stuff comes your way, you got to be honest about that too. Okay. See, one little word of caution is don't hang on to the good stuff. Anybody tried that yet? You ever notice how good stuff kind of evaporates the minute you put your arms around it, start trying to hug it? Okay. Everybody clear about that? See, there really are two sides, but see, just because of the nature of the things that we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about a lot of negative stuff as we go through the steps. How to take your inventory. See, we're not looking to inventory our assets. Because I hope everybody's getting the idea that where you learn the most is from mistakes and character defects and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So some who feel they've done well may dispute this, so let's try to think it through a little further. Practically everybody wishes to be rid of his most glaring and destructive handicaps. Everybody find a few glaring, boombox kind of thing? Is it, no one wants to be so proud that he is scorned as a braggart. See, pride is what? Character defect. See, in religions it's called a sin. So he has mentioned pride. No one wants to be so proud that he is scorned as a braggart, nor so what? Greedy. Okay, so you might notice that something is beginning to be shared here about different kinds of character defects. Greedy, that he's labeled a thief. No one wants to be angry enough to murder. Lustful enough to rape, gluttonous enough to ruin his health. See, no one wants to be agonized by the chronic pain of envy, or to be paralyzed by what? Sloth. See, which is, everybody know what sloth is? Sloth. Procrastination or laziness. Okay. And, a lot of us, get a little confused about sloth because, see, we're workaholics in the world, busy people, see, but when it comes to the program, our own inventory, spiritual principles, major league, three-toed, hanging upside down tree sloth. Okay. They say, it's just stuff that we got to start being honest with ourselves. See, so what did he just do? He just gave us a list of the seven, what's called the seven deadly sins, see, or character defects. It says, of course, most human beings don't suffer these defects at these rock bottom levels. Okay, see, so the major handicaps that come out of these, see, what he's saying is it doesn't take a whole lot of spiritual growth, see, to stop doing those things, see, and to be willing to stop doing, I think I'll stop raping, So we who have escaped these extremes are apt to congratulate ourselves, see, and it's a trap. So we start going, hey, something's working, and we stop working. So, yet can we? After all, hasn't it been self-interest, pure and simple, that has enabled most of us to escape? And so, once again, see, the program isn't selfish, see, but isn't it, see, a survival instinct on our part, realizing that we're doomed, that got us doing this in the first place? Okay? See, so you start looking at that, and you go, well, maybe I'm not such a spiritual giant after all. Okay? Not much spiritual effort is involved in avoiding excesses which will bring bring us punishment anyway. Is that pretty clear to everybody? Not too hard to do those kind of things. See, but when we face up, remember the word face from page 64? When we face up to the less violent aspects of these very same defects, then where do we stand? Okay, see, and that's what he's going to start talking about now, and that's what we're going to look at in step 6. See, what we must recognize now, see, is that we exult, see, in some of these defects. Everybody know what exult means? It's to love and to cherish something. See, to really, wrap your arms around it and go, mine, see, that kind of stuff. See, pretty cool? Okay, see, let's all read the next sentence together out loud. We really love them. See, a denial of that, see, is one of our problems. No, I don't really love this shit. See, but, oh yeah? See, so we need to be honest with ourselves. So you might find that you do. See, who, for example, doesn't like to feel just a little superior, see, to the next person? See, where's that come from? See, don't you do that? We all do that? Just a little bit. Just a little more spiritual. I just got better programming on, cool. Okay? See? Or even quite a lot superior. I bet he was laughing his ass off when he wrote this. Okay. Isn't it true that we like to let greed masquerade as ambition? See, and then we don't have to face, see, that it's really greed. See, nobody likes to admit they're greedy. I don't know if in the book study you guys were in, I told you the story of the resentment I had with my Aunt Goldie. This lady has dominated my life ever since I was a kid. She's a very wealthy woman and knew how to use it. And she was quite kind to my family. My folks were alcoholics, and a lot of times, we didn't have food and shoes. And, my aunt would always jump in there. There were always strings attached to everything. And so I grew up with this major resentment. See, and about 40 years of collision with her. See, and, you're out of the will, you're in the family, you're out of the will, you're in the family kind of stuff that goes on. And these fights would go on for years and years and years. So you take my inventory, and I do all this kind of stuff, and I admit all the resentments, and and I get over it, and most of my resentments were gone, but not that one. And I was like, what is this? And I was reading this one day, and it occurred to me that the real basis of the resentment I had had for her over the years was this thing about an inheritance that was supposed to come my way out of, their wealth. Okay, and so I couldn't ever, break free because they might really cut me out of the will. And see, underneath all of this stuff, all the tap dancing that I had done, and the dishonesty and my anger and all that, see, was my own greed. See, and it had been there most of my life. See, if you've ever seen those old Perry Mason shows, about half of the old Perry Mason mysteries were about greedy relatives murdering somebody who pissed them off to get the inheritance. Yeah, and usually part of the story was, these people just wouldn't damn die, see, and leave the money. And so, here comes the nephews and all that, see, and they nail them. See, and that's really where I've been coming from. See, and as soon as I realized that, faced it, see, my own greed was really the source of my resentment with her. That resentment was removed immediately. See, when I saw the root cause of it. See, and I had never copped to that. See, I would just never, ever admitted things like greed and jealousy and that sort of stuff in my life. See, so getting down to the root of these things is really important. It sets you free from a lot of stuff. Okay, so isn't it true? It's a question. How are you going to answer it? That we like to let greed masquerade as ambition. See, it's convenient. It means we don't have to really look, see, at what's going on with us. Okay? To think of liking lust seems impossible. I don't like that. Okay? But how many times men and women speak love with their lips and believe what they say? Okay? Important sentence there. Believe what they say. Okay? So that they can hide lust in the dark corner of the mind. I love you forever, baby, see, and lots of romantic rituals and all that kind of stuff. See, really coming out of lust. See, that's tough for a lot of us to face. No, I'm this romantic person, I'm just this, that, or the other thing. Lust, wham. See, can you face that? Okay, and even while to admit that their imaginary sex excursions are apt to be all dressed up as dreams of romance. It's really interesting. See, there, a lot of people, you ask them about a porno shop, for example. See, what do you think of pornography in adult bookstores? Oh, horrible, 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 horrible. See, you walk in their house, and here's these Harlequin bodice ripper romance novels, see, which are what? They're softcore porn. See, and Cosmo magazines with tits hanging out, and see, there's all this okay kind of stuff, and that's bad. See, what's it all based on? What is all of it based on? See, do we really have a right to feel a little superior to other people and look down our nose at them and all that kind of stuff? Just some things that you can start looking at. So you start to see this in terms of character defects, okay? Just based on what you saw in your fifth step. Okay, self-righteous anger. This is my favorite. See, it also can be very what? Enjoyable. See, have you ever enjoyed your self-righteous anger? Just take a look. See, most of us, I've got it right. Some anger is justified, healthy. See, see, I'm dying, but it's healthy. Believe me, I had a heart attack. Okay, in a perverse way. Perverse, remember, means self-will. It's one of the definitions, and you might look the word up in a good dictionary and find out all the meanings of perverse. It's pretty interesting. See, we can actually take satisfaction from the fact that many people annoy us. Okay. That's kind of an amazing thing to start to look at, see, but we enjoy being annoyed so we can be right and judge and have opinions and gossip and see all that stuff and stuff. Okay, for it brings a comfortable feeling of superiority. The gossip barbed with our anger, a polite form of what? Yeah, see, ask yourself, do you gossip? What's really going on when you do? Okay. It's a pretty major character defect that most of us have. Okay. I used to think only women did it. See, and I found out when I did my sex inventory that that's false, that I've been gossiping all my life. A polite form of murder by character assassination has its satisfactions for us too. Anybody ever seen that? There's this lady, Joan Rivers, a comedian. She has a talk show that's on TV, see, and it's like based on gossip. See, that's the whole deal. It's really amazing. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so gossip barbed with our anger, a polite form of murder by character assassination. Next time you find yourself gossiping, just remember that what you're doing is politely murdering somebody's character. It might make you think, hey, maybe this is not God's will. Okay, so it has its satisfactions for us too. Here we are not trying to help those we criticize. What is this attitude that we're trying to gain as a result of working these steps? Attitude of service. Constant thought of others, now we can help meet their needs. See, gossip is one thing that doesn't do that. Self-pity is something that doesn't do that. Guilt doesn't do it. Justifying things that aren't working doesn't do it. There are a lot of things that don't help. They don't work. In fact, we need to find those and get them rooted out so that we can be free to help, give some service. So here we're not trying to help those we criticize. We're trying to proclaim our own life. Righteousness. Yeah. Everybody, I'm sure, has heard the saying, most people would rather be right than happy. I think there's some real truth to that. It certainly was, isn't it? Okay, when gluttony is less than ruinous, we have a milder word for that, too. We call it taking our comfort. See, I just have a healthy boy with a good appetite. Okay, so. We live in a world riddled with envy. Is that true? Do you live in a world riddled with envy? Ever envied anybody? You know anybody who envies anybody? Do you see it anywhere? To a greater or less degree, everybody is infected with it. Now, I don't know what your experience is, what you began to see on your fourth and fifth step, but I was riddled with it to a great degree. And I had never called it that. I always had some other terms for it. Sometimes I called my envy ambition. I called it a lot of things. But I never called it envy because I didn't want to admit I was envious, jealous, and greedy, and all that kind of stuff. So
Sometimes self-righteous anger comes out of envy too.
Could. Sure could. It's these things, when you start looking at things, they have their roots kind of all over. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. to a greater or less degree, everybody's infected with it. You got to ask yourself, am I infected with envy? What's the evidence? How can I see that in myself? From this defect, we must surely get a warped, a definite satisfaction. Everybody remember what warp means? To bend and twist. So bent and twisted, get definite satisfaction. And it was pretty warping for me. I could see that envy and some of these other things had definitely given me a very distorted view of what's valuable in life and valuable in terms of relationships. I valued, I was going to defend to the death healthy anger and healthy fear. That's a pretty warped view of these things, but I had it. And the way I found those things was by just continuing to take my inventory and putting these things into practice. And start looking, for yourself. Okay. Else, why would we consume such great amount of time wishing for what we have not? Do you do that? Do you waste time wishing for things that you want, and wish you had, and don't have, and God damn it, how am I going to get it? Most of us do. Okay? Rather than working for it. Or angrily looking for attributes we shall never have, instead of adjusting to that fact and accepting it. Boom. This is where I am. This is what I need to do. I used to do that with my sponsor a lot. He's out there running around doing all the spiritual stuff. I'm back here just getting angry on a daily basis. I'm trying to be that instead of, facing what I have, doing what he did to get rid of his. Okay. And how often